I'm prior military. I grew up with my father who was like, there's no thumb sucking, just get out there, dust yourself off. I was a tough little
Hmm.
kid. My most authentic self is, I'm going to tell you, you may not like what you hear, but I love you too much to let you suffer. And
Ooh.
I'm going to let you fail. And that's a tough thing for leaders to do, because when we look at people on our team that fail, we take that personal. As a leader, that's one of the hardest things to realize. How much rope do you give them, and how much do you come in and do it? But it's a two-way street. They're watching you, and they have to be willing to be developed and coached and led, because if they're not, you cannot lead that horse to water. Okay, he ain't gonna drink.
That is so good right there. That's one of my favorite mic'd up moments on the show. I'm gonna have trouble. I always say this, trouble cutting this down to a promo. Tracy's got this bright smile on her face, and she's just a warm, loving, kind-hearted person. She doesn't look like this tough military hard ass that's going to tell you the way it is, and grew up in this situation where her dad was tougher on her, which built her this thicker skin and has helped her and allowed her, we're going to talk about her dad in a minute, but has allowed her to be a great leader. But she has the ability she's more versatile because of all that. She's got the toughness in her. She understands discipline, yet she understands the relational and socializer skills of a great leader as well. Holy smokes, talk about concocting the perfect leader. I said the ultimate leader. I think I'm looking at one right now. Our guest today is nationally known for her leadership expertise, as well as her ability to connect on a core level with her audiences. She brings with her 4 decades of experience across 4 different industries, including graduating from the U.S. Air Force Academy, serving as an officer for 12 years. She certainly practices what she preaches and is a lifelong learner, earning her PhD in leadership and has an MBA in global management. Profits from her company support the Tremendous Trust, which has provided over $1.3 million in donations, both locally and globally, over the last 8 years. Her latest book is titled Spark: 5 Essentials to Ignite the Greatness Within. Welcome to the show, host of the Tremendous Leadership Podcast, Dr. Tracey C. Jones.
Mike, it is such a tremendous honor to be here today with you. Thank you for this privilege.
I prepare for every interview, and preparing for this, I learned so much from preparing for your interview through your books. And I just want to say, in your website and all the information that you've been doing, and I'm inspired by everything that you've been a part of. And I got to give you a little shout out. I mean, I had received a total surprise gift. This wasn't planned. I didn't know this was coming. A lot of times when I have a great guest on, I'll receive their book in the mail as a thank you. And that's always an amazing thing. And every time I get to read them, I don't always get to read them before the interview. In this case, I did not get to read that before the interview. But I just got to give you this shout out, because I literally, it's like you picked these books that were these little mini stories here that they're like the classics though. I mean, this one's Milton Hershey. Right here, right? Albert Hubbard.
Yes.
John Wanamaker. I mean, these are the classics. And so in our conversation, I just want to share with the audience that Tracy and I had. We had a couple conversations previous to saying, hey, you know what? This would be great if we record it and get it on the podcast. Great point. It was it all came together naturally, right?
Sure did. Thanks, Mike.
And I just want to say this collection, it's hand selected for right up my alley. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to do that. And thank you for the idea of just surprising me with these classic books, and it's really going to set us up for a great interview today. So thank you again, Dr. Tracey Jones. Appreciate your time being on the show.
You are so welcome. Thanks for bringing them up with the audience.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you guys can check them out yourself. They're all available on tremendousleadership.com. That's Tracy's website. And all of her social media is clickable in the show notes. So you guys can go ahead and click through. You can watch this interview if you're listening right now and you wanted to see a little bit more of what we're talking about. I showcase some of the books. You can hop on YouTube and watch this on YouTube as well. So again, thank you for that leadership library. Let's kick this thing off and talk leadership principles right out of the gate. Sound good?
It sounds tremendous.
I mean, you're like softball question right out of the gate. Yeah, I guess we could do that. Like, real creative, Mike. No, but you've been a student of leadership for years. I know you've read every book under the sun, most likely on leadership. I'd love to lean on your expertise so our audience can really soak this up. What characteristics, in your opinion, characteristics and qualities make the ultimate leader?
Well, I think, first of all, leadership is so highly contextualized. In other words, based on our coding, based on our experiences. I was in the military, so my imprinting of leadership and who influenced me is going to be very different than people that weren't in. So the first thing really for the leader is their self-awareness and self-discipline. Those are two of the top emotional intelligence qualities. And so I think for leaders, you have to know yourself first before you start looking for that team that's going to resonate with you and that you're going to really get, and you're going to form that collective bond. So I would say really an awareness of what really does it for you. And it's called implicit followership theory. And what that means is that you and I and everybody out there is a leader. It's even picking a spouse. You've got certain traits and characteristics and things that really jive and resonate with you. And you have ones that are like mixing oil and gasoline, just not a good thing. So for leaders, I really say, a lot of it is, well, let's look at other people and what we can do to make other people what we think they should be. That rarely works. That never works long term. It's a temporary fix. So really for leaders out there, do as much as you can to understand what is, just like what's your favorite book or what's your favorite TV show, what's your favorite leadership theory, and really dive into it and understand you as a leader, what brings out the best in you. Because there are going to be certain people in your life that bring out the devil in you, the beast in you, and other ones that bring out the best in you. And that's what you want, those that bring out the best in you.
So build a team around your leadership style, or do you feel that people can learn these different leadership styles and apply them to them? So are you saying, I just want to make sure I understand, so there's some natural giftedness in certain people that have a built-in leadership, they could build upon it, but also they need to be reflective on who they are as a leader so they could build the right infrastructure?
Perfect. It's almost a blend, but honestly, Mike, we all have our most authentic leadership style. Okay. And you can learn a lot of different ones. I got my PhD in leadership, so I studied them all. But there's certain ones that when I read, I'm like, yeah, that really resonates with me. And so I took the book smarts and I really dialed that into understanding the science behind why the self-motivation did or didn't happen with certain people in my team. So you really need, the more you can understand the grounded research and why it happens. For example, if you have somebody running a nonprofit or a church, for example, they are probably going to have more of a teaching, or what I'd call a pastoral leading style, more of a shepherding, where they're going to kind of be leading with that type of persona, that type of vocabulary, that type of resonance with the flock, so to speak. But then you've got other people, you've got the patents, you've got the people that are in crisis leadership, you've got the people that really are going to, in the military, for example, that it's going to be much more directive. And so you just need to understand for you what really works for you. We're entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurial mindset and leadership style is vastly different than the 9-to-5 leadership style. Right. So when I bring people on, and I've worked in big bureaucracies for 20 years, now when I bring people on my team, I really got to make sure, if you came from that world, can you make the pivot to understanding what the startup everyday world looks like? Because that, from a leadership and followership perspective, is vastly different than the 9-to-5 mentality.
And the thing that was jumping out at me when you were saying that is how important it is to be authentic. Because
absolutely.
If someone is more of the relational leader opposed to the director role of a leader, similar to what I would expect in the military, right, where someone's just going to call you out, tell you what you did wrong, tell you what you need to be doing right now, and boom,
correct,
move on. Opposed to, all right, I really need to connect with Mike before I can deliver him this next assignment, because if he doesn't know why we're doing it on the big scale, he's not going to be bought in. So this is going to take a little bit more time working with Mike. Two different styles, but if one leader was trying to be the relational person and that's not in their makeup, right? Like a football coach who tries to be tougher than they really are, and the team's just like, that's not this guy, right? But some people can relate better, and they don't have to scream at their team, but the team's going to perform at a high level because they're connected. I think of like Marv Levy with the Bills. I'm from Buffalo, if you couldn't tell by the shirt, and I got it all over. I got Bills mugs behind the camera here. And he didn't always need to yell at the guys to get respect, but he had these really thoughtful, I mean, he probably read all these books in this box over here because he was a great student of leadership. And he was one of the most respected coaches of all time, right? So I think that's that really hammers home your point.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. You kind of alluded to it. The 5 love languages is, if you haven't read it, it's a brilliant book. They have it for singles. They have it for everybody, because there's going to be certain things that people do for us that we love and certain things that don't do it for us. So there is a professional love language style too. And just like there's implicit followership theory, there's implicit leadership theory, where the followers, i.e. the players, are going to resonate with certain coaching styles. So leadership is really about unpacking that. I was in an equine training program a couple of weeks ago with a friend of mine. And for any of you that love horses, they're incredibly intuitive creatures. And part of this was we had to take the horse and we had to lead it across a couple things that the horse would not typically want to do. And of course, me loving animals, I was in my kinder, gentler, oh, come on, horsey, scratching his ears, hanging on him, loving on him. And he was like, his name was Wow. He's like, no way, I'm not going with you, lady. And I'm like, but come on. I'll give you carrots. I'll give you sugar. And then the team watching me let me do this for a couple minutes. And then finally came up and whispered in my ear and said, lead the horse. The horse wants you to lead him. And I did. And I was like, wow. And then I let him, he pulled a little bit, but then I showed my confidence and he followed. And that was such an epiphany for me because I'm prior military. I grew up with my father who was like, there's no thumb sucking, just get out there, dust yourself off. I was a tough little kid. And so in this kinder, gentler world, I lost some of that. And you need both. Resilience, tough love is still love. And that was just a wonderful reminder that my most authentic self is, I'm going to tell you, you may not like what you hear, but I love you too much to let you suffer. And I'm going to let you fail. And that's a tough thing for leaders to do, because when we look at people on our team that fail, we take that personal. And Bob Berg has a great comment. He says, we are responsible to people, not for people. And so as a leader, that's one of the hardest things to realize. How much rope do you give them and how much do you come in and do it? But it's a two-way street. They're watching you and they have to be willing to be developed and coached and led, because if they're not, you cannot lead that horse to water. Okay. He ain't going to drink.
That is so good right there. That's one of my favorite mic'd up moments on the show. I'm gonna have trouble. I always say this, trouble cutting this down to a promo, but that is definitely one I want to remind myself when I do like the episode 100 highlights. I want to get that on there because it's so important. I love Bob's quote as well, that basically, you're not just spoon feeding someone. You need to work, in a way that's going to connect for them. So you're setting them up for success. You're not just giving them the success. That's kind of what I gathered from that quote as well. And like this horse represents, you can use that as an example of how everybody needs to be led in a different way. So if you're more coddling, that's just not the style and the way that the person on your team is going to, it's not going to resonate with them. The third thing I got from what you just said is don't judge a book by its cover. I'm looking at all these books over here because guys, if you're listening and not watching, Tracy's got this bright smile on her face, and she's just a warm, loving, kind-hearted person. She doesn't look like this tough military hard ass that's going to tell you the way it is, and grew up in this situation where her dad was tougher on her, which built her this thicker skin and has helped her and allowed her. We're going to talk about her dad in a minute, but has allowed her to be a great leader. But she has the ability she's more versatile because of all that. She's got the toughness in her. She understands discipline, yet she understands the relational and socializer skills of a great leader as well. Holy smokes, talk about concocting the perfect leader. I said the ultimate leader. I think I'm looking at one right now.
Oh my gosh, Mike, thank you so much. I need to pull that and have that be my new bio. Thank you so much.
I'm trying to earn this gift somehow.
Oh my goodness. Listen. Wow.
I love it. There's an awesome quote on your website. I saw it and I was like, man, we got to uncover this. Pretty cool. I'm going to transition to this here. It's your own words, so I'd love you to elaborate on this idea. But it's every idea should be simplified but not diluted. Context is critical when communicating vision and values. Can you elaborate more on that?
Thank you. Well, this really gets into higher order thinking and critical thinking skills, something that is very sorely missing in the world today. It always has been, but now it's the same as it was. It's just really amplified because of the interconnectedness, because of the phones, because everybody gets to have a talk as an expert and chime in with a tiny little sliver of information. So whenever you hear anything, or somebody comes to you with, did you hear this? Or what do you think about that? Or you see somebody doing something in your organization, and right away, what does our brain do? It's the Summer Olympics, right? We get the gold medal on jumping to conclusions because we automatically just know what's going on in that person's heart and why they did what they did. And I read a book by Brant Hansen called Unoffendable. For our listeners out there, I would highly recommend it. That and Henry Cloud's The Power of the Other totally changed my life. And unoffendable means you're not God. You don't know what's going on inside somebody's head and heart. Okay. And so don't jump to conclusions and don't be so easily offended. Isn't that music to everybody's ears out there?
I'm over here. Like, I think that should show up with everyone's next.
Oh my God. And get him on this podcast.
With your tax return, you should get that book.
You should get that, right? And what it says is just chillax. Okay. One of the little books you're going to read in that booklet is Charles Schwab. And he says, listen, don't get so ruffled and offended with every little minor transgression everybody does. Just give yourself grace. Give people grace. So get the information. There's something in leadership called a sense-making strategy. And where leaders fail is when they just assume they're looking at something and, oh my gosh, I know exactly what happened and why that person did that. You don't know anything about it. And it's the old, hey, until you walk a mile in somebody's shoes, don't you dare weigh in on this. Okay. Now, if somebody asks you for input or they're doing something directly in violation of your rules and regulation, that's a separate story. That is compliance. I'm talking about getting to the motivation of why something happens. So leadership, you really have to pull back the layers and just get with somebody and say, hey, what happened there? Why'd you do that? What were you hoping? And just really understand where they're coming from, because everything that I have thought was as it seemed turned out not to be as it seems. And I'm like, good Lord, why did I send that email out? Why did I respond that way? If I just would have taken a couple more minutes and just really got the rest of the story. And now with the way the world information age is, we can always get the rest of the story. So leadership, people be like, well, a good leader does this. Well, that's nice, but that's like saying we're going to get rid of poverty. It's such a nice overarching utopian goal, but let's talk about the reality. It all depends. And
it's
so
not
that's
black.
really
It's not black and white. I mean,
no, it's not black. It's never black and white. And so you got to unpack that. And the different books and the different people I meet and the different mistakes I make all teach me that I am a slow learner, but I'm working on it.
Well, one of the things I thought too, you're talking about simplifying the messaging, right, is John Maxwell, something I heard him say one time, another great leader, right, is he puts the information, he puts the cookies on the first shelf so everybody can get it. So when he's writing a book or he's doing a speech, he's not trying to be in this like impressive over everyone's head level scientific to try to impress maybe the smartest people in the room. He's putting it on the first shelf. Everybody can eat it, can have some of it, can understand it, can consume it. And I think that is, a great way of summarizing kind of what we're talking about here, right?
Well, yeah, and my dad would say the SIPKISS principle: see it big, keep it simple. And I think Einstein had a quote too: if you can't explain it to a 4-year-old, you don't understand it well enough. So you just want to keep it really dialed into that overarching purpose, and really, really keep it simple. The other thing that you hit on was when you're unpacking things as a leader, because you've got all these moving pieces and you're trying to make sense of it and you're trying to make ethical decisions, but you really want to dial into the root cause analysis. And I learned this in the military. I was in aircraft maintenance on jets, and when a jet would come down non-mission capable, we had to troubleshoot it and we had to find the root cause, because if you fixed it and it flew again and you had a repeat or a recurring issue, that really dinged your flying safety and mission capable rates, because you fixed something, but you didn't address the root cause of the issue. So that really taught me in leadership. But you think you know what you're going to deal with. But take some time and dial back and peel back. Another great book is QBQ, the question behind the question, and dial back and say, okay, this is happening. Now what? So what? Now what? So what? Now what? So what? Until you really get to the core of this is what we're going to fix. And then when you do that with your employee or your client or your author or whoever, you can really unpack what is at the root of the miscommunication, the fear, the enmity, the whatever it is, and unpack what's causing the bone of contention.
That could be a book on marriage, honestly. I mean, I was married for 6 years, and I see it with a lot of people in business as well. It's like trying to fix things, surface level issues, items that everybody knows about, but not necessarily taking as much time. Sometimes they'll dig a little bit deeper. I've seen it happen in counseling, either I've been a part of or I've heard stories and seen things like that don't sound right, where they're trying to fix what's presented and not that core issue that stems the question behind the question. And until you really get there, all this other stuff can get fixed. But if you have a crack, here's another analogy, like thinking about the foundational crack, every time there's a storm, it's going to still, the basement's going to get water. It's still going to have damage. And that damage is long-term damage. So that's kind of an analogy that comes to mind, but I think it's so true. Here's what we're going to do. We talked about your dad a couple times. We're going to dive more into him. We're going to take a 60-second sponsorship timeout. We will be right back with Dr. Tracy. Podcasting is a great way to engage with your audience and stay consistently relevant. The only problem is you don't have the time or desire to produce your own show. You simply want it done for you. And that's where Social Chameleon comes in. All you need to do is press record and upload the files. We'll handle the rest. From planning, production, post-production, distribution, and digital marketing, we have you covered. We realize that times are tough and funds are tight. And Social Chameleon believes in building supportive business relationships. By clicking on the link in this promo, we'll provide you 7 free podcasting tips to get started, as well as a free 30-minute online consultation. This is the perfect opportunity for entrepreneurs, keynote speakers, industry experts, influencers, and anybody who has a personal brand. With Social Chameleon, we help you build a brand that is out of this world. We're ready and waiting, so what are you waiting for? Click on the link to get started today. All right, we're back in action with Tracy. You guys can connect with her directly on social media. Those links are all clickable in the show notes, making it super easy for you guys to connect with her. Her websites are tremendousleadership.com, and also her personal site is tracycjones.com, and Tracy does have the E in it for anyone who's putting that in, trying to find that on their phone right now. Make sure it's TRACEYCjones.com. All right, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Couple times, and I teased it right before the break, but a couple times we talked about your dad, and we did off camera as well. And I know how important and like integral he was in your life to who you are today. So I want to go right there. Your dad, the late great Charlie Tremendous Jones, he had an incredible influence on your life. And can you please share a little bit of some of your favorite memories that you've had with your dad, and maybe a moment that he taught you that you always remember, like it's stuck in your head forever, and just a cool, like, teachable moment that you remember your dad having with you?
Absolutely. Well, for the listeners out there, if you haven't ever heard of him, if you go over to Tremendous Life Books on YouTube, I have archived all of his speeches. And he came from really humble beginnings, born in the Depression era in Alabama, flunked out of school in the 8th grade. Mom left him, deep poverty, lack of education, but this unbelievable adaptive regenerative spirit. And I tell people he met my mother, Gloria, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He found life insurance, and he found the Lord. And those 3 things, that was the trifecta of everything that he needed. He rarely talked about where he came from. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until one day before he passed, Mike, that he actually shared with me how difficult his upbringing was. And I was like, Dad, talk about teachable moments. I'm like, why didn't you ever really share this with me? And he said, because that was in the past, and that was gone. But it was so incredible for me to hear that. So he just went on, and his favorite quote that most people know him by is, and it's on the cover of the box, that you'll be the same person 5 years from now, except for 2 things: the people you meet and the books you read. So if you have this desire to meet tremendous people and read tremendous books, you too will have an unbelievable, tremendous life. And so I tell people, Mike, that growing up with a motivational speaker for a father was a cross between boot camp and a sitcom. Okay. So it was always a lot of fun, but it was incredibly always very focused. And he used a lot of humor. And I can remember as a teenager, just why can't you be normal? Can't I just date? Can't I just watch TV? And he's like, no, these are your formative years. And he took the TVs out of the house. And when we were kids, he's like, trash in, trash out. You can volunteer, you can play sports, you can get a job, you can write book reports, but you're not going to sit here and waste your hours. Could you imagine that even today? And so he would just always very much work as a joy, and we're here to give back. And the more you read, we earned allowance that way. We read great books that he'd pick out, a lot of the people in there, and we'd do book reports. So, but the one thing I had as a child, he took me and I said yes, because I got him. I am him. I imprinted the tremendous genes very hard, not only in how I look, but I got his leadership style. Not every child would resonate with the tough, tremendous love, but I did. And he would take me and we'd go to these meetings. And I, as a little girl, would listen to Zig Ziglar and Norman Vincent Peale and Mark Victor Hansen and Bob, all these, as a young adult. And I just saw these unbelievable people just sharing with other people how everything you want in life you can have with the right attitude, with a strong work ethic, and with your faith in your advocates. And so that was just an incredible upbringing that I had.
Wow, how powerful, man. I wish I could have had the opportunity to meet him, but I think that's so powerful. As like in his last moments, he revealed a little bit more about his tough background, but didn't allow it to kind of live itself twice, which I think is a really good message that I don't think about often, and I don't know if our audience thinks about it as much as they could or should. In that, if you had a problem, a tough situation, and you dealt with it. Not saying don't talk to people if you need some help with it, or don't hide it so it's really rotting away in your soul. But your father chose the time he wanted to maybe unpack some of it, which was right at the very end. So you didn't have to hear it, live it, feel the pain, because he already experienced it whenever that was, when he was a little boy. And so why have his daughter now have some of those same scars that you didn't need to have? He
didn't need to have. I didn't need to know that my grandma did this. I didn't need to know that. All I knew is I didn't hear a lot about it. So you sense as a child, but all I knew that was in the past. And what it did, here's how he relived it. He always said, hey, Tracy, things don't go wrong to break you down so you give up. They break you down to build you up so you become sweeter and more empathetic. And he's like, pain makes you bitter or better. So this traumatic upbringing made him one of the most tender-hearted, sweet, yet tough people. And when people met my father, they would say to him, he would look at me, and because he was a broken, abused underdog, he resonated with people. And that's 90% of the people out there are coming from a place of hurt. So how he used that pain is he allowed it to make him sweeter. He didn't have to go on to a blah, blah fest about, well, let's one up who had it worse in their life. But he just looked at people and let them know, I get you. And that's okay. And you can get through this. So it just, this tough, bad things that happened made him into a beautiful, kind, gentle spirit, and made him the motivational speaker. How can you motivate people if you don't understand their pain and you haven't come through it?
Right.
That's why he was so impactful and powerful.
Yeah, most of the greatest people that we've studied in these books, and it's not only in business and entrepreneurship, it could be in athletics, it could be in the school system, and change makers of the world really is the best way to lump everybody together. Is like people that are doing great things to make change and impact for the long haul, not only within themselves. And a lot of it, you see that adversity, and it's what people typically learn within themselves, and then they turn around and use it to help others, and that's where it gains power, because pain makes you bitter or better. So that's basically talking about that adversity factor. Is, do you turtle up and lay down and you're on the mat beaten down forever? Or is it a moment in time that you can learn and say, how did I get here? Why am I here? Why do I not want to feel like this ever again? What can I do so I don't feel like this ever again? And then once you have that magic moment of like getting yourself from that moment to something better, you want to turn around and say, who else can I help get out of there?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
most of the time, that is a lonely place. There's not always people reaching out saying, can I help you right now? They don't even know. Mike, Tracy, our audience, they don't always know what you're feeling in that moment. But once you feel it, it's like, how can I help other people get out of here? And that's what your dad did with you. He did it through his books. He did it with his audiences, every opportunity he had. You're doing it. I want you to know and remember. I know when you're going through, you're not looking for the pat on the back, but with your books, the books you literally have written yourself, the books that you have published through your company, the books people can find on tremendousleadership.com are all set up so people can continue to learn through the things that you've personally learned from, your father has. And here's the thing, too. It's not plagiarism when you learn a lesson from a great book, and then maybe you talk about it in your own book, but it's through your lens and your experiences, right?
Right. That contextualized leadership you said. Yeah.
Yeah, it's where
absolutely.
the magic happens, and that's why it makes it real. So your dad had these stories he was learning from the greats, but he also applied it to his own story, which is why it resonated with the audience, right? Now you have a newer book. It's your second latest book, I believe. It's about millennials, and it's really helping them out, directly educating them on what their parents didn't tell them, right? That's right in the title of the book. And also what their employers need them to know. Can you share a few key examples, both on, on what millennials, what their parents aren't telling them, what you're referring to with that statement, and then also a couple of things we can learn about what their employers really need them to know?
Absolutely. Well, it's the whole thing about leadership and followership. And my father wrote in Life is Tremendous, the 7 laws of leadership. And you know what? The 7 laws of leadership also apply to followership, because if followership is beneath you, leadership is beyond you. And the military really was outstanding at teaching us this. They break you down to nothing. You're not even a name. And then you build the team, and then that's where leaders are born out. So the message of millennials really is about the 2 things that I really find is that a lot of people grow up today and you think that the universe revolves around you. And I'm all for healthy self-esteem and self-confidence, but we are put here on this planet to be part of a collective, both from an evolutionary standpoint, a lone sheep is a dead sheep, and from a theological standpoint. We are all made with the Imago Dei seed to grow together in fellowship. And so what I would tell to the young emerging leaders, when you get in there, don't start thinking about, oh gosh, this isn't me. You don't even know you. You think you know all the answers, but you don't even know the questions that are coming your way. Be open. Experience at that young age is the most important thing that you can get, because you're going to learn what you like, what you don't like. You don't even know the talents that lay latent within you yet, because you haven't had a chance to, get on the mat and show up yet. But there's a lot. So take time, take seasoning. The other thing is be willing to accept feedback and constructive criticism. My goodness, we have born out a generation that is enabled to put very nasty things behind a screen and not deal with healthy conflict, where you share with somebody, not the whole rest of the world, what's going on, and then you are open to receive, so you can take that and build that into you. So that's really 2 of the things. One, when you get into a company, it's not about you. And I used to think, well, it's just about the military. I signed my life over the military. When somebody's paying you, you are there to support their collective mission. So understand that first. Everybody thinks, well, it's me and they got to cater to me. Nope, that is not how life works. When you start your own company, you can then be the boss of everything, and we'll see how that goes, kind of thing. And then second, like I said, be open. And my dad always said, we're born with a thin skin and a hard heart, and we really need to have a soft heart and a thick skin. And that's a lot of the problem with that. I can't believe my boss said this to me. What do you mean? Do you think you know more than them? They've been here for 20 years. That's kind of really egotistical and narcissistic to think that you are so new and yet you already know everything better than everybody. And so you just got to be humble. We want leaders to be humble. Followers need to be humble, because you cannot be developed if you are not willing to be led and taught. So that's the biggest thing I would share.
I have never heard it articulated that way, and that's like really hitting home with me. I'm thinking about it myself. I hope everyone who's listening to this can think about how they can take what you're teaching and apply it to themselves. And there's a lot of reflection there. I think a lot of times ego can get in the way of greatness. You see it with athletes all the time where they have like a couple great seasons, their ego's too big, and now they're having trouble with their coach, or they're out of line as far as where they're supposed to be on the team, right? And that like team understanding and aspect is gone. The other thing I would say is if a leader ever did something where it's questionable, maybe you don't like what they said something that's completely out of line, or they did something that you know about that you don't agree with, something that breaks down trust a little bit, so you can question them, but rather than, I'm not saying question everything about them, there still may be some good, not, and everybody can decide on how this actually applies to someone who may be thinking about when I make that statement. It's like a book. You can read a book, and if I've said this many times on this show, if there's 12 chapters and 10 of them are really strong and help you, but 2 of them talk about things that you're just not comfortable with or you don't necessarily agree with, or it's against your principles or something that you learned and just know in your core that's not something you're willing to change, okay, don't throw out the whole book. Take those other great things from it. So if you're an employee and your boss is coming down on you and you just clock out and say, I'm just gonna do things my way, or they don't know what they're talking about completely, that's not right either, because very rarely is someone going to be in that position of leadership, or if it's the owner of a company, whatever it might be. They typically have so many experiences that we can learn from if we're actually dialed into it, right? I don't want to go off on a tangent, but you're shaking your head. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Finish the thought. Put a bow on it.
Well, that is absolutely right. Okay, first of all, leaders don't know everything. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I look for in followers, one of the keys to followership is critical thinking skills, not critical spirit, like you said, where you just check out. I'm mad at my boss. Oh my gosh, do I see that? I see that even in churches, and I'm like, dear Lord, if anybody should be beyond this childish behavior, like you said in marriages, kiss of death. I'm done. I'm sitting in counseling. Nope. I'm not going to talk to him anymore. Forget it. Just leave, because if you can't open up. So, I mean, that's really important for the employees. Get with the boss and say, hey, this came off like this. Did you mean that? Sometimes they're human too. And they may say something that they didn't realize came across. They may be having a bad day. And so let them know. Now, I'm not talking about if your boss is telling you to do something illegal, immoral, unethical. That's a no-brainer. But these are the nuances where you said it. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is a DSM psychological illness called dichotomous thinking, black or white. I love him. I hate him. I hate my boss. My boss pissed me off today, or that we can't be
radical.
Like that.
It's too radical.
It's too radical. Yeah. And you know what? It doesn't give people grace, and it acts like you're the judge and jury of everybody. Okay. If you don't like your job and you can't support your boss, I tell people, you may not like them, but you can't fight them. And if you are fighting them, get off the payroll, because now you're a bigger problem than anybody else. So look at this and just say, hey, in the grand scheme of things, and my dad would say, people would come to him and say, Charlie, I'm quitting this because I hate my boss, or I hate the people I work with. And he's like, well, you're going to hate them wherever you go. So you might as well stay with the ones you know. It's that old 60s song. If you can't be with the one you love, honey, love the one you're with.
Oh my God.
People are people. And you think that you're going to go green grass syndrome, the next job, a better boss. And you fail to realize there are certain elements of the human condition that are always going to annoy you. Is it worth leaving your job over? I don't know. Only you can make that decision. But nothing gives you a right. No annoyance gives you the right to check out and not show up and deliver with excellence every day. Because if you can deal with a boss that annoys you and perform with excellence, that's on you. And then you keep gaining experiences, because this isn't going to be your boss forever. And so, like what you said, don't throw it all out and say, well, this is stupid. I'm not going to, stop. That's dichotomous thinking. And I struggle with that too, because this isn't my first rodeo, and hence I can be, I've seen a thing or two. And then I'm like, whoa, Tracy, whoa. Right when you say those words, your pride is starting to get in the way and you're going to miss your blind spot. So, great insight though, that you brought up about just in the grand scheme of things, listen, to our listeners, I have walked off of places, not without, leaving right in 2 weeks notice, where I look back now and I'm like, why did I let that get under my skin so much? It really wasn't that big of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, I was so puffed up and offended at the time. Hence, I should have read Unoffendable, that I really let it stew and simmer and get to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was my own biggest limitation. Yeah.
I've done it myself one too many times, where like one thing starts the process. Another Marv Levy quote is, once you're thinking about quitting, you've already quit. So if you're at a job or position and you're already, something's under your skin and you're already like done, you're toast basically, then any kind of growth from that point on is going to be limited to non-existent, because you're already clocked out. So if someone's giving you great insight, but in your head you're gone, you're already on Monster Jobs or Indeed, you're looking, it's very little you can do to get that person to come back and if they had any level of greatness prior to them clocking out, very difficult to get them back. It's almost like at that point,
brilliant.
Like you just make it happen, because you're dragging everyone down with you. You're dragging everyone with you.
You are, and you're taking a paycheck, and you're really stealing from the company at that point, because you're not engaged. We call it OBE in the military, overcome by events. You're gone. And you can tell that in relationships. You look at somebody, let's try and work on this marriage, and their eyes are flat, and you're like, they're
if you ask them truly, when was this thing over, sometimes people will be like 3 years ago, but they didn't get divorced yet,
Right. Well, man, but my dad also would always say, well, Tracey, sometimes I feel like quitting. And my father would say, listen, you cycle through life. You can feel like it, but I love that you said, don't think about it. All feelings emanate from a thought. And there are days where I feel kind of untremendous and not sure if I want to do this, but I don't let that thought of quitting take root, because as you said, as a man thinketh, push it out, get rid of it, and get right back in the game. Because thinking about it, man, that's a great insight. They're already gone.
I'll say this. I'm thinking about that too. The only way, and this is just my own thought, theory, whatever, I haven't read this, or it's not something calculated based on previous events, but I would say the only way to get someone back, whether it's in a relationship or that person who's thinking about the next job, is you have to start back with the foundation all over again. Yes. All that trust and their love for the game needs to be rebuilt.
Right, back to their purpose.
I'm thinking about myself in a role that I had where I left the company because, like I always say, the fulfillment was gone, kind of my trust with the leadership was kind of gone and wavering. And so I was thinking about the next steps. And while I did that, I still performed, came in with a good head on my shoulders. But there was that love of the game was kind of gone. So then how much, even if I was putting in an effort, was it still 100%? I think when you're mentally clocked out and emotionally clocked out, even if you're trying to put 100% in, it's very difficult to do that. For me to be able to put a true 100+% in again, I would have needed to reestablish key relationships in the company with leadership, right? And it's like you got to go back to that. And I think in a marriage too, if it's not over completely and the pilot light's not off for both partners, what foundational things can be built on? Every little thing that started from however long they've been dating to through marriage, where are those gaps? There's the little cracks in the facade that you got to go back and repave. Otherwise, you have all these cracks, and eventually what's going to happen? It's going to be like a demolition scene where it all comes crumbling down. So I think that's something I never thought about. So I think like if you're mentally clocked out, you're basically already in that decision. The only way around it would be to really build that all back up from the ground up.
Well, and that's what the counselor's saying. I heard this Christian counselor saying at a women's retreat, hey, why are you complaining about the man in your life when 5 years ago you were praying for God to bring him into your life? Something happened. Okay. He answered your prayers, and now, but you got to put into it. But Mike, you hit on the second thing for followership. In addition to critical thinking skills, the other thing is all-in engagement. Mm-hmm. It's like being pregnant. You are, or you're not. You're not a little bit, there is no almost. You're either in or you're out. And so if you go back, and for people contemplated, should I stay or should I go? If you're going to stay, You need to go all in. You cannot do, like you talked about, those little cracks, because your employer is going to sense it. You're going to be, well, I'm all in, but I'm still going to go on these interviews. It's kind of a burn the ships thing. You're either in, and it doesn't mean that a year from now you can't go, you know what, it is really time to leave. But you cannot patch something and get back to where it was once good if you're not, it's saying you're in love with somebody or married, but you're still dating people on the side. That tends to never work out very well, because it's a covenant, it's a commitment.
There's a weak link then. I think of like a machine that's all moving and all the pieces need to be extremely strong for this thing to work. And if one of the legs of it, whether it's a stool, right, is just weaker or not totally dialed in all the time, and it could potentially go down, the whole thing is going to come down because of that one stool, right? That one leg.
Mike, so you said it.
I mean, if someone's coming in, it's like either you're going to be the sturdy leg we need here, or if you're not able to do that 100% of the time, we're not entrusting that this chair or business or relationship is going to be sturdy enough to stay. So it's not like you can't rely on, again, I'm just going to call what it is, half-ass, or any level. It doesn't always have to be half. It could be 75%, could be 25%, could be 2%. It's not enough to, less than 100% is not enough to get the qualified job done. I don't want to
That's your next
too
book.
much on it. There you go. We're at the top of the hour. I know you said we can go over a little bit. I have a fun question, and then I have kind of a summarized question to drive home on it. The fun question is, and I prepared this because, and if you don't want to go here with it, just say, Mike, can we scrap this one? And I would not be offended. But obviously you served in the Air Force, the U.S. Air Force, and it was in Roswell, Mexico, right? New Mexico.
That's where I went to school the first year, in Roswell, New Mexico, before I went to the Air Force Academy.
And you were in Germany.
That was a school.
That was a school
Germany,
there. Yep. So Roswell, Germany, England. I did my homework on you. You bounced around a little bit, and that got my attention. But what really got my attention, because I'm a geek, was Roswell. I'm into like these UFO stories. So it's historically reported. I'm not making this up. I don't have the metal, the tinfoil hat on right now. But the RAAF, which is Roswell Army Airfield, captured, and this is historically reported, in 1947, they captured a UFO of some sort. Today, there's actually a McDonald's near it that's shaped like a spaceship, probably just to kind of have fun with that moment. Is there anything you can share about that you're able to say? For example, blink 3 times, like if you've seen a UFO in person?
You are so funny. Okay, so anyways, I love being in Roswell. I was a huge X-Files fanatic. Science fiction is my all-time thing. And I could remember when I was a kid, I would donate money to, I forget what it was, but it was the search for extraterrestrial life. So total nerd, always be the astronaut, blah, blah, blah. I get it. And then I went to Roswell. I tell people it's before the aliens were there. And I would go to Nellis Air Force Base when I was active duty military, and my ID said indefinite. And I'd go to the Star Trek, the Quark Bar in the old Hilton, and everybody was dressed up like Star Trek figures. And people would be like, oh, you're in the military. And I'd show my ID and it said indefinite. And they're like, who are you? And I'm like, I can't tell you. I'd have to kill you. And so I just
played it
so
out.
I'm all about this. I will say this. No, I do not know anything about it, but I will say this. I'm so glad you asked this. I read a book as a young girl. C.S. Lewis is one of my all-time favorite authors. One of the little booklets in your package is on C.S. Lewis. He wrote a book called the science fiction trilogy, Out of the Silent Planet, That Hideous Strength, and Paralandra. Out of the Silent Planet is all about a science fiction journey where somebody is outside of Earth on a planet that has not been marred by sin. So my thing is, and the silent planet is Earth because we were built, and I'm a Christian, so you're going to hear my worldview. I believe in the Genesis creation, that God spoke the world into existence, and he made Earth uniquely habitable for us. He also made everything else, okay? But he created this for us, his crowning creation, and he breathed his breath into us. That's why we're here talking about these unbelievable things, and why we're not just like dogs, from goo to zoo to you kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? We have this intrinsic motivation. We suffer pain. We can do great things. We die for each other. That's that's an interesting thing that not my dogs have. And I love my dogs. Okay.
Right.
But we have the Imago Dei, we have the God seed. Okay. Other things have God's imprint, but we have his spirit in us. if we've accepted it. Again, as followers, you have to be willing to accept it. We have the choice. You accept it or you don't accept it. I choose to accept it because I would like to have the creator of the cosmos in me. That's kind of a no-brainer for me. But everybody gets to have their own thing. But in Out of the Silent Planet, I go to John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son. So there was only one manifestation of God in the form of Jesus. Therefore, he came to earth. So there aren't 100 other habitable living people out there. And if there are, then they haven't fallen. And they're not in this sin state. So only from a biblical theological standpoint, listen, we're going to be in heaven and we're going to be able to fly all over the cosmos here, when we die. So if you have accepted that, so I'll get to know. But I don't think if they are out there, and Out of the Silent Planet by C.S. Lewis is, man can't communicate because we have been marred by sin. We're the silent planet. Now, everything's going to be back to redeemed. It's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. It's going to be back to the way it was. Like you said, let's get back to how it was in the beginning when we were in complete fellowship with God. That is going to happen. But right now, we're in this broken state. And God's living out his love for us by, telling us, hey, it's just a brief time that we're in these meat suits before we go back to, the way it was. So I would say they're going to look out there, but they're not going to find us.
Interesting.
Because okay. I don't think I still maintain, and as a geek, as a fairly analytical mind, I just don't see how nothing came from nothing and yielded this. Yeah. And I just don't see, you could give it 7 gazillion trillion years. If you started with nothing, it's like saying I got a fridge full of food, and if I just let it sit there 7 million years, eventually a 5-course meal is going to evolve.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. I definitely agree with a lot of what you said there. I was just more so curious about not even so much the creation of our planet, but just the existence of things from another system, because obviously we know
he made everything. He made everything.
If this is the universe, my notepad right here, what we know is literally like if I just did the smallest black pin drop of my notes, that's what we know about. And so it's to me interesting that there's all that other space we don't. But it just was a little fun thing because you were at Roswell, and I thought maybe you've heard something. And
hey, who knows?
It's all
God
out.
Created everything.
I mean, the CIA, I believe it was, they put 50 years of documentation out on the internet, clickable, and I looked at some of it, and I'm like, man,
did you really?
I wish I had.
I got to check it out. I'll go check it out.
Clone myself so I could actually go and read all this stuff, because who has the time for it? But it's really interesting that there's written documents that are government-based and out there. And then some of the more recent videos that are really interesting, where they have, guys that are doing this stuff in the Air Force that are tracking anything in the air. They can lock onto an object and they can understand what speed it's moving at. And, our aircrafts all can move at a really nice speed, right? Things that they've seen from other countries. We have an understanding of what's the capabilities are of our allies and of our enemies, no problem. Then there's this thing they lock onto, and it literally, I'm sure everybody listening to this has some understanding of that this has come out. If not, Joe Rogan has a guy on that's like from, I think, our military or whatever, that actually tracks it. You should look into it. But this object literally goes from one side of the screen to the other side of the screen and gone at speeds that they've never even, it's not even close. It's like 100 times the speed or whatever it is, that anything that we've ever seen. And it's clearly a sizable object. It's not, it's a speck on our scale, but they know that that's literally like an aircraft size object. Really interesting things like that. So it's not even at this point just, this guy said, or he said, she said. I mean, there's like video evidence of it now, which is really interesting. So the thing is, we don't know who's in the ship, where it's from. Is it someone of our planet? Is it some weird other parallel universe? I don't know. I'm not saying it's going against the Bible at all. I just think it's...
Right. Well, let's call Ridley Scott and ask him.
Call Ridley Scott. I don't want to go into this whole thing, about the Bible. I'm a believer myself, and I just simply think that, everything that was maybe written in there doesn't, it encapsulates what we're learning from the teachings of God through Jesus, obviously.
Absolutely.
But I don't know, did maybe God intentionally left things out, or didn't have, tell the story for whatever reason, like, who knows? I mean, there's very
Right.
specific things that are included in there, and it's a book. So there's obviously, who knows? Maybe there's more that can come from that. Does Jesus come back and continue on more? Because we're ready for it. That's one of the things I heard, and we'll wrap up the conversation because this was so much fun. But one of the things I heard too is that there's like a task force that knows a lot that they're not willing to share with us yet because either these other beings or this task force doesn't feel we're ready for it yet, which is really interesting too. So who knows? Maybe they're just not coming here because they don't feel like we're ready to hang out with them yet. Who knows? Interesting. Wanted to go there for a minute. That was fun.
I wish I knew more. I wish I knew more.
She did blink a few times while she was responding to that. So you guys can look into that as much as you. I'm going to play the slow-mo and count them. How many times did she blink?
You're so funny. You're so funny, Mike. Okay.
Let's put a bow on this thing. So where do we go here? I want to make sure we kind of hit home on everything that you said here. And I'm not seeing it in my notes, but I'm going to, just go from memory. It's a question that comes up at the end of my episodes because I think it's so strong in understanding what's important to you. And you're an author, so there's no pun intended on this, but imagine yourself as the author of your own story. You are the protagonist, right? You get to write the ending. So whatever pages you feel you're at or chapter you feel you're at, everything else is blank. God willing, you live to be 100 years old, whatever it is, right? Very long, fulfilled, prosperous life. You're already doing that now, but let's say you get to write that for many, many, many more years. What would you like your legacy to be if you can define it?
Probably very similar to my father's legacy, and that would be to fall deeper in love with Christ. Every day, if there's one thing on the thing, is just to get to know, like any relationship, the more you get to know God, the more intimate you can be with him. And he loves that because he's in us. And just like your spouse wants a relationship with you or at one time did, we want that too. I would also say my legacy, I would love to have just to help people get all the experiences that they had in their life out in book form. I love helping people get their stories out because, Mike, we're not going to be here forever, but a book lasts forever. And I'd love to do that. And then I would love the legacy to keep coming and developing people to understand the transformative power of living and reading. And I'd love to keep making money for that so I can keep giving money and the trust back to organizations, scholarships, homeless shelters, addiction shelters, young people. So I just want to keep giving back either through books or through financial resources, the righteous use of wealth. I want to be a good steward of all God gave me so that I can really bless as many people as possible. However he blesses me with that. I just want to be, at the end of the race, I wanted to say, good job, Tracy. You kicked ass. And I gave you a lot and you made a tremendous amount out of it. That's what I want my legacy to be.
You're doing it. You are absolutely doing it.
As are you, friend.
Thank you. And why I love doing this show is having the opportunity to speak to really cool people like Tracy, but it's not that she's just got this neat story. She's doing something big with it. It's not, her purpose is not she's successful or she's living in her father's footsteps at all. It's all the other people. I mean, we talked about it briefly for like a half a second at the top of the show. There's a trust. So profits from her company, her publishing company, go into it. It's called the Tremendous Trust, and over $1.3 million have gone to great causes. So she's heart-centered here. It's not, again, just this financially free situation so she can be sipping Mai Tai somewhere. Hey, that's a great lifestyle. But she's on purpose to serve in so many more meaningful ways. And that's why having you as a friend is, I'm going to say the word tremendous, but it really is. Like, I'm just like smiling ear to ear, knowing you, hearing this. I don't even know if I did this episode's service because we could literally talk for another 5 hours and still have more content to talk about. I'm looking forward to diving into the collection that you shared with me here. Thank you again for the amazing gift, totally unexpected. Any last words you'd like to give our audience before we part ways here?
No, Mike, I just thanks so much for the honor. And like I said, for anybody out there listening, thank you for listening. And if you feel that you're not worthy or good enough, you absolutely are. and just understand that you are loved, you are counted as value, and it's just up to you to get out of your own way and be open to that. So thanks so much. And thanks, Mike, for the honor and your comments.
Yeah.
Wow. You really blessed me this morning.
Yeah, I definitely see you being on the show again. I mean, we could pick this back up anytime. There's too much to talk about. This was literally like an icebreaker for the audience. So I'd love to have you back soon. Give me a call anytime. You're awesome. Guys, check out TraceyCJones.com. Tracy has the E in it. And also TremendousLeadership.com. And all of her social, clickable in the show notes. Thank you guys so much. I'd like to give a huge shout out to everyone for tuning in, especially those who listen all the way to the end to hear this message. Seriously, I appreciate you, and my guests do as well. Giving a quick reminder to subscribe to this show. It's completely free and will allow you to receive notifications when new episodes are released. If you'd like to provide a tip as a gift, you can do so via patreon.com/micedup. It's spelled MIKED up. Patreon.com/micedup. You can give as little as $1 per month or as much as you'd like. Every dollar is greatly appreciated and completely unexpected. Appreciate your reviews and your messages coming in on social as well. Keep them coming. Your feedback is valuable and absolutely means the world to me. You can check out more episodes and content at mikeduppodcast.com. We're powered by Social Chameleon. You can also follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active, and it's at Mike DiCioccio, MIKEDICIOCCIO. Thank you so much for your continued support. You guys know what to do. Be great and be grateful.